Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest podcast. Let's get started. Nick Cavuoto is a four-time CEO, founder, Fortune 500 consultant, private equity investor, keynote speaker, and global business leader who is dedicated to seeing people succeed with an intuitive approach to business, growth, and personal transformation. Nick, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, man. I'm excited to be here. So really appreciate it as well. Thanks for having me.
So listen, before we get into, your experience with deals and this, I know you have the 7-step process, for personal brands, and one of them is right on the mark on deal stuff and all the other stuff we're going to talk about. I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I guess we had them, but we didn't call them personal brands back then, did we? Did you even know what a personal brand was?
No.
Did you know what a CEO, of a Fortune 500 company was? I don't know. What did you want?
The term wasn't coined yet, I don't think. But my dad was a 4th-generation entrepreneur. My grandfather, of course, was a 3rd-generation entrepreneur. So, there was this part of being a businessman that was always attractive. But I'll be honest with you, man, it was kind of the default backup plan. It's like, I knew I was good at sales when I was about 12 years old. We had an opportunity with our school where we were doing a fundraiser, and they're like, hey, we're going to go around and sell these $20 candles to people in the neighborhood. And I just went and I just kept going until I felt like I should stop. And I sold 82 in a weekend. The next closest person sold like 15. So at that point, they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, I just thought that was normal to overperform in that way. And it was a really fun game. I loved it. And so that was one of the early wins that I had. But dude, ultimately what I wanted to do when I was 12 was I wanted to be in the NBA. So that was not going to happen for an average height dude like me.
Yeah, I was about to say, where did you tap out on the height scale?
Totally, man. Yeah. And, and it's all good. I ended up, playing sports there further on, like into college and stuff. But it was just one of those things, man. I remember when I was 12, I was like, I'd love to be in the NBA. And I think by the time I was 13, I was like, well, that's not going to happen, but I'm really good at sales. So
I love it. Hey, listen, and neither you nor I are Muggsy Bogues or whatever.
Totally.
we can't be short and still dunk, right?
That's true.
I love it. One other question looking back, what was your first deal of any type? It could be something, when you were younger as a kid or early in your career, anything you consider a deal.
Yeah, I think negotiating with my father to be able to go hang out with my friends was probably one of them. It was the first time that I learned about objections, because I would go to my dad and I would start talking about something. I must have had a rhythmic tone, or I must have had a way to try to ease him into the sale. And he would go, here he goes. He's trying to sell me something. But the funny thing is, he always bought. So I'm going to go back to that and say that was the first deal was, probably convincing my dad to let me go hang out with my buddies when I was in high school or, late middle school. And, we were going to hang out with girls. It was not just going to hang out with the boys, not at all.
Of course. I love it. So listen, you got such an interesting background. I mean, we read some of it in the bio, with companies and private equity. And then, there's also this personal growth side of things. And then you got the personal branding. So before we delve right into the stuff that's really applicable to deals, just give people a little more overall, on the scope of what you're doing now, and and everything, who the people you serve, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when a lot of people ask me, so hey Nick, what do you do? A lot of times, and this is what I've learned through a lot of deeper understanding about myself as a human being, that question translates in my mind to Nick, what do you see? Because I'm a seer. I'm an advisor. I'm a watchman. I'm an opportunist, right? So I see the caution. I also see the opportunity. I also really deeply think outside the box. So, and I mean that in the most specific way In fact, I remember taking a culture index at one of the corporate companies I was working with. And the last line of the whole thing was to Nick, it's not that he sees outside the box. There isn't one.
Yes.
So to be a creative thinker and a creative problem solver, especially going into businesses, I don't have the emotional, energetic, or even strategic viewpoint on their company of all the pain that they've gone through and all the challenges and like, well, we can't fire Larry because he's been here for 47 years and he was Bob, the founder's cousin. I don't see any of it. All I see is where the opportunity lies and the best, shortest path to get there. And so that's what I do in a lot of companies. And it doesn't matter if it was with Fortune 500 companies. I managed over $2 billion worth of products when I was 28 years old. I don't know who gave me that job, but I celebrate them as much as I like celebrate the courage they had to like do it scared. They must have really needed someone who they believed could handle it. And in addition, I mean, I had to fight for marketing dollars early on in my career while I was transitioning from, over the air television or on radio, spending, hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month and say, hey, let's go try this social media thing, So I've been, a classic disruptor in business. And some people don't really jam with that term because they don't want disruption in their company. They don't like change. People don't like change naturally. So the kind way that I say that is seriously that I'm a maverick. I'm unbranded. I can come into your business. I care about results. I look at not only the return on investment financially, but also emotionally, because I know that that's how people buy into things.
Yes.
Is like, how will this make your life better? So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing now. I help people sell more things that make people's lives better. And that happens traditionally with 8 to 10 figure companies. But I also really have a deep lens on caring for the individual and helping people succeed as well.
Yeah. And listen, it's interesting because I'm a big believer in the fact, and I've talked about this on this podcast, that, our own personal growth and development as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as the executive team, right, is crucial and can become a limiting factor in the ability of your company to be successful and grow. And I think that doesn't totally disappear in huge companies. Obviously, it gets, it's less tied to any individual as you get into bigger and bigger companies, but still, in my mind, and this is interesting to me, and even though it may not yet tie directly to deals, but we'll get there. I still think it plays out because leadership sets the tone, and right, whatever the stage of personal growth and consciousness or leadership development or whatever it is that they're in, they set it, and that helps create the culture within a bigger company, and that does affect everything that goes on, right? I mean, so I think the two aspects of what you do, that personal growth side of it and the disruptive, maverick consulting, I don't know how they could be separate, although I think most people would look at those as two very different things.
Yeah, there's been a natural tendency, just like they used to say, well, you can't talk about politics, at your job. Remember those days? You can't talk about religion at your job. Now, the world, since the internet and really the inception of that kind of culminating people's attention, there is no separation anymore. So it's like everything that you experience personally, just like our old friend Jim Rohn, that he talked about, and the balance of like, if you want to be better at what you do and your work, like just work twice as hard on yourself, and those things will overflow. Because I've also learned that the companies I work with, and the larger that they get, and or if the culture, the more important the culture is, the more important the leadership quality is of the person coming in. So leadership, and then the support to the team, and then of course the strategy or the things that they're looking for. It's not isolated just to, hey, can you handle this one area of expertise or a specialty, tactical or technical role. It's, can you actually lead us to the outcome that we're looking for? And that takes the personal and also the professional grit on both sides. And it takes a lot more emotional intelligence in a room now to do it. And I even will barter that spiritual intelligence is starting to become really important, meaning intuition. Like, have you played this movie in your head before? Like, what do you know? What are you feeling? What are you sensing about this decision? And I think that starts crossing over, just like kings used to have fortune tellers and prophets at their table. There's an importance to having people who might see something a little bit differently than you do for the sake of advancement or protection. So they are absolutely one and the same. And just like I would ask my wife if I'm investing in a deal or an opportunity, I would say, I know that you're on the outside of this, but what are you sensing about it? What are you feeling? Is there anything coming up for you? It's a valuable, valuable question.
Yeah, love that. All right. So let's listen to this podcast, and you're aware that, we make a distinction between some salespeople call, their sales deals. And I'm not like judging that. Just those aren't the kind of deals we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Sales is on organic growth, right? Sales and marketing. The focus of this podcast is on the inorganic growth side, the deal-driven growth side. But there's something that's common. And I sort of like, for me, it's a bridge. Like we've talked about a little bit about the individual and our personal growth and how we impact leadership and culture in a company. But one thing I know that you're really big on is relationships. And that applies on the sales side, right? There's a whole concept of relationship selling, right? As opposed to transactional selling, whatever. But that's a thing that crosses over, right, to the deal side as well. So let's talk a little bit about that. And, and if you want to talk about it generally, or I know we're going to jump into how that applies in personal branding deals that you can do, but talk about the relationship part of it.
Yeah. I had a business coach I've been working with for 7 years. His name's Mike Kim, and he wrote the book, You Are the Brand, right? So really central to a core process around personal branding, which is how to have a highly profitable, highly fulfilling business that's really centered around your expertise and your reputation. And one of the things that he taught me was that marketing was about opening a relationship, not closing us out, right? And so for me coming in, I was never a direct response type of marketer in my very, very early days. Listen, my dad was, a drug dealer that met Jesus, okay? So I grew up in transformational leadership because my dad ran a nonprofit. But as that transitioned over and into time, what I started seeing was the importance of highly valuable networks, and also the people who My dad still has the same relationships, and he's grown all those relationships as well, but the same one he's had since he was 5-7 years old. So I've witnessed this again personally, and how it's pulled in professionally is the value of understanding that the more transactional, like the matrix becomes, and what I mean by that is like on LinkedIn, you get those messages every day of like, hey, you want me to help you get more? The more the world becomes transactional and misses what my stepdad taught me, which is on Fridays at 3:00, you go through all your clients and you call every single one of them and you tell them to have a great weekend. Those old school principles are going nowhere. In fact, they're becoming that much more important, especially if you want partner-based deals, not just to close the sale so you get your quota for the month. The world is really over that type of transactional activity and behavior. So coming from a guy who just turned 35 years old, let me just tell the OGs out there, like, I feel you and I get it and I'm with you and I understand the value of this on the relationship side. I think people, find themselves burning opportunities and burning bridges because they're just short-sighted. They don't understand the long game of how the world works. So that's why I love personal branding, because it is about reputation. And whether you're selling shoes today and you're selling courses tomorrow, like the people who bought your shoes that they didn't like are definitely not going to buy your course now. And it's that much more important to be somebody of high integrity and somebody who's inspiring and can lead the charge in whatever their big idea is. Yeah.
Love that. So I know on the personal branding side, you have a 7-step process. And, in our off-air conversations, we've talked about how step 7 is really the one that is deal related. So, I don't know that we need to go through all 7 steps, but if you want to mention any of them before you get to it, but let's, we'll build to number 7.
Yeah. I'll mention them quickly just so that the tie-in makes sense, So the first step of building again, this is all around building 7 steps of building a personal brand. And this is people who want to have a highly fulfilling, highly profitable, reputation run business. Okay. So experts, thought leaders, speakers, coaches, consultants, it kind of falls into that category. Even investors as well. It definitely can lead into as well. But here's the concept. The first thing starts with your personal story. And you guys will notice that I mentioned some things early on about my story. I threw in some things about my dad. So those of you who would really jam with that concept on the human behavior side and go, oh, I grew up the same way, I share those values. Immediately, there's going to be a form of attraction, which, by the way, the best partners that you're going to have are people who come from the cloth that you were cut from. A lot of times, somebody who gets you on a foundational psychographic human behavior level, not just somebody who can, get you a bunch of deals where you close a bunch of deals and at the end of the day, the relationship's fractured, or you figure out they're a con man. Why? Because that ends up impacting your brand as well. Yeah. So the sensitivity around it, what's our point of connection, is absolutely the first step. So that's why the personal story is really important. If you tell it, you'll attract people who have a likeness in your value system. Number 2 is platform. This is just like platforms, podcasts, TikTok, LinkedIn. It's kind of like, where are you building your brand? Where are the virtual stages where you're spending time?
Yep.
Number 3 is positioning. how you position yourself in the market, just like you read my bio earlier. 4 is product. So it's what are you selling? Number 5 is the price. Number 6 is the pitch. Number 7 are the partners. Now, here's the best part about this. You cannot find partners to help you position your products, to sell it to their audience, to price it accordingly, to get the best affiliate deal ops, to pitch it in a way that's going to convert, to be worth everybody's time. The order of these are extremely important. That's why I end with partners, because relationships are rocket ships. But anything that you scowl, if it's broken, guess what? You're going to scowl what's broken about that offer. And then that's going to lead to fracture in relationship, because we all know that at the end of the day, the consequence of a failed expectation is disappointment. The last thing that your partners ever want to experience. I've seen it running, partner marketing programs in Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to doing my own JVs with people who are, buying my products and the friends of friends who do the same. So yeah, man, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Those are the 7 steps.
I love it. So before I delve into the 7th step a little more and talk about what these kind of partnerships are, I want to talk about, as listeners know on this podcast views, I very often come back to mindset, because I don't care what information you learn on top of it. If the mindset isn't there, you're going to be limited. So one of the things I often raise is that there are so many folks out there that don't do partnerships, whether they're strategic alliances or joint ventures or affiliate deals or whatever we call them, right? Some sort of partnership deal. And, they're banging their heads against the wall to get into a new market, to launch a new product, to get into a new geography, to hit a specific vertical, right? And there are people who have access to that. And I ask them that simple question. Have you thought about who already has access to that industry, that vertical, that market, that geography, that whatever? And so often the answer is no. So I'm curious, because you have this great combination of this 7-step process and the consulting you do and the disruptive consulting you do in big companies and this personal growth, spiritual growth side of things. What do you think it is about people's mindset? Like, we're not even at the point of getting partnership deals done, but even putting it on the table as a way to grow. Because and you could, tell me if your experience is different, but I find so many fewer entrepreneurs and company leaders do that. Like the ones that do it. They really get it and they do it a lot, right? And then there's a bunch that don't do it at all. And I'm like looking over there like, what? So any case, your experience.
I think that people have a visceral internal response to asking for help.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, man. I think, and that, again, that covers, that's the all-encompassing truth. Because when we have to ask for help, a lot of times our assumption is that that request is coming from a place of lack, of need, of a place of being at a disadvantage, like you're, asking for help in the middle of the game because you don't know what to do, which could, oh my God, make your intellect questionable. No. When we don't ask for help, we rob someone else of the opportunity to co-create with us. And to me, that's the cardinal sin of relationships or rocket ships, is that you make it all about yourself. It's isolation and it's burnout and it's being in a place of where you're overwhelmed and you're frustrated and you're bitter and you're questioning what the heck needs to happen in order for me to reach the next level, in order for me to grow my revenue, break through the next market. Dude, I haven't built one of my businesses out of the 4 that I founded, not one of them, outside of finding the key partner as one of the primary steps. As soon as I figured out what the heck I was doing, the next thing that I did, I was just like, okay, setting my intention today of who can I help and who can help me with what I want. Then I prioritize and do it now. I never had to ask why. Why wasn't I doing it? Or why am I here? What's my purpose? It's like, my purpose is my existence. I am my purpose. But on a deeper level, I had to have the humility and also the ability to be a conduit. So those who aren't watching on video, I'm holding my hands in front of me, going like, in one hand, I have the ability to give something great, like lessons or opportunity or creativity or problems and solutions. And then the other hand, I have the ability to receive. Yeah. And our relationship with asking and our relationship with receiving, I've just learned how to say thank you. So when someone says, hey, I want to do this with you, or when they say, yeah, I'm willing to do it, I just say, wow, thank you. That's so meaningful. And I appreciate that so much.
Yeah. And it has me thinking about your 6 steps leading up to the 7th, people on doing authority marketing. So, because if you do those 6 steps, then when you approach a partner, you're not approaching them just out of need and asking for some, charity or whatever it is, right? You have a value prop that you're now pitching them, right? Because you've done the work, right? And we all, the best deals are obviously going to be the partners going to get something out of it. So, in my mind, it's just, it's interesting natural tie-in to say, hey, no, I mean, listen, it's no different. I mean, we're willing to pay money to people, to do stuff for us, right? That's just one form of exchange of value. In some sort of strategic alliance, a joint venture, or affiliate relationship, there's an exchange of value as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're really great at what you do and you're really clear on your offer, and I think this is where most people overlook the opportunity is revisiting the offer for the context, right? Context is so important. Hyper personalization. If I had a guy I was talking to earlier today, and he's like, we help adults who have childhood trauma. And I'm like, this is great. There's a podcast and stuff. We're talking about things around, how the brain works and all these other things, human behavior. But what was interesting was I love the simplicity of what he said. Now, if he's going to go do that inside of a specific category, industry, horizontal and or vertical lens, he might have to say like, we help military veterans who've had childhood trauma. Like you sometimes have to actually mold and position the uniqueness of what you do. Just take that 1 or 2 days to do it, to adjust it to that market and be prepared going into that partner conversation, because that's their ability to come back and say, thank you for doing the work ahead of time. Generosity always wins. Like if you took the time and your character represents as someone who's like, hey, I'm going to go first. And I want to make sure that whatever I present to you, that I gave it my all. And I really was thoughtful and I had a lot of intent. What do you think that other person's going to do? You're going to guilt them into saying yes to being a partner for you because you were adaptive, because you can not only help them, but help their audience. Everybody's got to win in partner deals. And I think that that's where it's just like, it becomes this monotonous thing. Listen, here's the deal. And this is what I learned in my life. It's been really, really valuable. If I am not basically turned on by whatever project, company, problem that I'm solving, whatever I'm doing, I say no. It's got to be a 10 out of 10. And when it's a 10 out of 10, like watch out, like there's zero unstoppable behavior. And that's what's so important to the partner. So that's the way that I view it, is like, if you're going to ask someone to be a partner, you're asking them to co-create with you. There's going to be nights that they're spending away from their kids in order to develop a big idea with you. If you're in a startup or, you're not in some Fortune 500 company, but at the end of the day, the uniqueness of those relationships, you carry them with you everywhere. They're the most prized possession in business, are the partners that you have.
Yeah. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. All right, so let's talk about what these partnerships look like, because listen, there's probably a lot of people, a lot of our listeners who understand authority marketing. It's become more known. I talk about it because it's been a shift. I mean, for decades, I built my firm the old-fashioned way, right? Networking, referrals, doing great work for the centers of influence. Making that Friday call, that lunch, or that playing golf when I used to play golf, whatever it was. And then I started doing some speaking, but then I actually studied this authority marketing model. And I'm like, wait a second, the things that have always frustrated me is that I want to be able to stay top of mind in a better way because I have great relationships. But the truth is, people may know a few people who do what I do. And if they, in the moment, we're all busy. And, if the last guy, they happen to see, was top of mind, then they'll get the referral because, listen, we're very good at what we do. We're not the only one, right? So always stay top of mind more. And then also more establish a brand and expertise, right? As a go-to person in certain areas, right? Around deals. That's why I have a DealQuest podcast, right? A lot in the financial services space. So we have specific things in the investment advisor space where we've created a brand and people know where to go to there, right? But that's only been in the last 5-6 years that I've done that. So any case, I had to learn it. So let's make a distinction, because a lot of people, when they think about these online affiliate deals, anything in the influencer category, whatever, they think about the big celebrities who are getting paid to, for product placement, to do whatever. They make money off brands because they wear their sweater or hat or basketball cap or use their perfume or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, it works well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said it works well.
Yeah. No, it works really well.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But, we're talking about more, we're not mainly talking about those people, right? We're talking about more people like me, professionals, experts, leaders, entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So what do these deals, what do these quote unquote partnership deals look like? What are the opportunities out there for folks in the authority marketing space, whether a speaker, a coach, a consultant, an entrepreneur, a professional, whatever it is?
I'm going to go by percentage-based points, okay? And I'm going to kind of move my way up. So it's the way that my mind works. I'm like, I needed something it's like rock climbing. I need the next rock to climb as we go.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at let's just say it's like a 10%, right? And I'll just tell you guys my favorite ones to do, because I think those would probably be the most relevant. One of the ones that I love to do, if you're looking at just going at a 10% partnership, that really comes down to how well you've built a community. Okay. So this is the outside of the ring, and a 10% partnership is just like, hey, let's just say I have a Facebook group where I run masterminds, or I'm part of a unique affiliation, but I'm actually the one who brought all the people together and they come on a rather consistent basis.
Yeah. What
I'll end up saying, because a lot of people ask, hey, I met Jim, they'll call me up. Hey, I met Jim and I want to do a deal with them, but he's in your community and you and I actually do a part of the similar thing. Is it okay if I work with them? Those people, by the way, have insane integrity, and I love them to death when they do that. But here's what I ended up starting to create was what's called an overlap deal. So what would happen is if people within my community wanted to do business with each other, I would actually promote it. I would actually suggest it. And I was a lot more free in my ability to not feel I got to work with everybody, because truthfully, I'm such a great facilitator and I'm great at gathering people. I don't really have time to do a lot of fulfillment anymore. So I'd rather create ops wherever there's crossovers, where people can just say thank you, and it's the honor system. So it's a 10% overlap deal. If someone meets someone in my community, then I just say, hey, you're going to sign this doc. It's an honorary document. It's not legally binding. And I'm just going to ask you to do the right thing. And by the way, you get a lot of really good people in your network. And by the way, when they then pay you on that, then you really know who your allies are. Yeah. So you're solving future problems by doing that, and that overlap deal in multiple categories. But I think it's a great way to understand who your potential partners are in the long run versus who are the people there just to capitalize, that will play by the rules. And then, of course, who does it at all, and not kick those people out. So that's the first one. The second one, and let's just kind of stay within that context. The second one, for people who have building a personal brand, you're always going to have a community, or it's your audience, right? So the second layer, a 20% deal would be let's say that I'm working with my buddy Rob, right? Rob is my financial advisor. And Larry comes to me and says, hey, do you have any financial advisor people you work with? And I say, yeah, I work with Rob. I'm going to send you guys an email. I'm going to connect you both, and you just need to work with him. This is one of the most overlooked things, because if you're a thought leader, an expert, a coach, a consultant, if you're in that category of thought leadership and you're truly an expert, you have a big audience, you have a lot of expertise. If you're that person, then there's opportunities for people who are just going to do whatever you say. They're coming to you for the answers anyway. So when you're hey, even if it's in a book that you're writing, you're hey, if you want to do this, then go talk to this person. You need to hire this person. Those deals can come at 20%. So, I've done 6-figure deals in communities that I'm a part of that follow the same principle. And all of a sudden the guy's sitting there, and one day he's just going to get a $20,000 check that pops on his desk. Again, it's about doing business the right way. And it's truly embedded in the way of doing business with the right people, and not just the outcomes that they can get you. All right, 30%. 30% a lot of times will find its way in affiliate deals if I want to promote other people's events, products, systems, methodologies, courses, webinars, whatever it is, even their books as well, into my community. So typically a good starting point for an affiliate deal will be around 30%. And that doesn't matter if you're, looking to promote products that are in your YouTube description about, the type of camera that you use for video, or if it's somebody who is part of your network and you really value them and they're launching their first mastermind and they're hey, I'm gonna charge $1,000 a month. So I'm going to pay you a retainer over the next year, $300 a month, if you can help anybody from your community enroll. These are great, great deals. And it's a great way, of course, to have that bilateral opportunity, because when you need the same thing from them, you end up having these partners you can count on. All right, I'm going to go to the next one, 40%. 40% is, this one can also kind of line up at 50%. So I'm going to kind of blend these ones together. But 40 to 50% is typically if you're doing a joint venture. Now, I know classically that's you like cut down right down the middle. But I look at this as sometimes like what I've seen in mastermind groups that I'll run. Somebody's like, hey, I'll bring all the people. And if you want to use your methodology and your teaching and training, that's where you can kind of buffer 60-40 or 50-50. And I don't really like to go beyond those limits. So if you're doing anything in the co-creative measure with somebody else, sometimes you don't want to do all the heavy lifting. So you're willing to part with 10%. Sometimes you're actually the other scenario where you're like, I have time and space and opportunity, whether it's a live event. It could be a live event. It could be a mastermind. It could be products and services, teaching, workshops. I've done plenty of those deals as well. So that's kind of where I see it. It always blends into the concept, of course, of this blend of like expertise and community. And, if you're building a personal brand, those are the first two things that you need to have are high expertise and a great community of people.
Yeah, and listen, one of the ways to build that, right, is to leverage other people's who have bigger communities than you. But that raises, going back to that question, or that topic we talked about doing the work to make sure you have a value proposition, because the most successful folks who have big communities, two things. One is they're getting hit up all the time, right, all the time, and number two is the smart ones, at least, and most of them are very protective of their community because they, they should be vetting what they're allowing in to their community, what, that it's consistent with their brand, that, and also that, it's quality people and all that kind of stuff, because it could hurt them. So, so making sure that you have something to offer that bigger player is absolutely crucial in having a real deal.
Yeah, it is, man. It's also some of the OGs in the industry, the original gangsters, right? That I've learned from. They've said to me too, like sometimes like you want to hold your ass. Like one of my personal branding coaches, and he's worked with John Maxwell, and John Maxwell, he's worked with Todd Herman, who's works with the NFL. He works with Michael Hyatt. I mean, a lot of really, really big names. And he said, when I launched my first book, I'm not going to ask anyone for anything for like 2 years. Then when I launch my first book, I'm going to ask all of them to show up for me. And so there is some really smart strategy around timing with your partnerships. It's not just about the people, but sometimes it's around the purpose of it or the timing, and launching a book and also building that network with people who don't do exactly what you do. John Maxwell's in leadership, Michael Hyatt's in, now really in kind of like he does a lot of journals, but mostly in the financial space. So they're not in the marketing space of personal branding. So you build allies who are complementary to what you do. And sometimes you'll get lucky. You might launch something if you're, a marketer who does paid advertising. You might do something with another specialist who's a great copywriter. So it's just widening your network. That's why it's so important to not burn the bridge and just look for the one-stop opportunity. I think people are a lot more willing to help others when we, approach with humility, and it's honorable, and we save our ass for the right time.
Yeah. I mean, and, going back maybe to that more internal work and mindset conversation, obviously brings up, you mentioned a couple of years curating before you make an ask on the book. I mean, the word patience comes up, right? And unfortunately, some folks aren't that patient.
Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, patience it's unique. It requires planning. And I learned from my business coach, he brings in a lot of cultural references, and because he's Korean. So, I didn't grow up the same way that he grew up, and his unique experiences and the books that he read as a kid and the ones he studied as an adult from his culture are very different. And so it's a lot of it's about precision. He's like, dude, your mom didn't do what my mom did if I didn't get a certain grade on a test, right? And he talks about this very openly. He talks about it in his book as well. But it's a unique thing that I learned about, which is the value of patience and precision. It's the year of the podcast. It's the year of the book. And I'm like, dude, a whole year, like just to do your podcast. And I look back, and he became one of the most influential people in this entire industry. And it only took him about 3 years of intense focus with laser precision and the consistency where you have that long battery of patience to go like, I know that if I focus on this, I know what the next step is and what's coming. And I honor about him so much. I'm a little bit more of a gunslinger than that. I think that plays to my advantage in other ways. But at the same time, I deeply value some of those unique conversations and experiences that can help us do what we do better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting to me. I mean, I was just thinking that's probably a good counterbalance as a coach for you, right? Because it just takes that energy of the gunslinger energy and at least brings an alternative viewpoint that you can consider. And,
it does. It does. It does. I always came from the thought that, the way that you overcome resistance is through speed.
Yeah.
So isn't that interesting, right? Like our point of reference, whether it's our upbringing, whether it's our unique experiences, whether it's our culture, it doesn't matter. But there's always differences in understanding, like ideas around throttle, ideas around patience, ideas around speed. And then to not overcondition, but to find what that balance is. Just like you said, it's so wise. I love that.
Yeah, listen, speed's awesome in some places, right? It's I think for me and in a lot of personal growth, I've done everything from, I love Bob Proctor's work around paradigms and how all this stuff, most of what we do is unconscious and that's why it's so hard to change. And there's some other personal growth work I've done and all in this area. There's nothing like patience is called for sometimes, speed is called for sometimes. It's just that most of us have a default way of being based on the way we were brought up and culture, whatever it is, right? So if we're always doing speed, unconsciously, or if we're always doing patient unconsciously, the speed's going to run us into trouble. Sometimes the patience is going to run us into something, maybe have us miss opportunities. Whereas if we have a distinction of speed and patience, right? And then we can actually make a choice in a given situation on whatever the best tool is to oversimplify between speed and patience, as opposed to having that default of whatever it is that's unconscious or subconscious for us. That's where we have power, because then it becomes a tool as opposed to running us. So yeah,
that's really, really good. Yeah, it's like the app. Don't just let the operating system just turn it on.
Exactly.
Open app login. Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you see in terms of these partnerships, right? And choosing the right partners and where people have done successfully, where people have made mistakes. Talk us a little bit about that, what you've seen in terms of those kind of choices.
I'm going to bring a very unique angle to this part of the conversation because it's depth on a lens of psychographics, which is why I'm brilliant at marketing. That's why a lot of the biggest companies in the world hired me, was they were like, you chose to do it a different way because I wasn't focusing on direct response, the right magic words to insert at the right time. I was obsessed with behavior, the psychology, the values. I'm going to take it one step further for this conversation, which are the virtues. I look for golden virtues that I can align with anytime that I'm selecting a partner. I'm going to tell everybody exactly what they are. I believe that in the split of virtues that I live my life by, so I kind of know whenever, at the end of the day, when everything's reduced, if we see these things the same, then I know that I can work with these people. On the left-hand side, basically in this visual, we have what's called red light experiences or emotions, which are really dialed into criticism, comparison, or judgment. Right? And so criticism, comparison, or judgment, I look for these things when someone talks. Are you criticizing not only other people, are you criticizing yourself?
Oh yeah.
Are you comparing yourself and or other ideas or things in a way that is not creating a benefit, but creating discourse? Or lastly, are you passing judgment? Do you lack compassionate curiosity? Because if you do, it's going to show up in the way that we work together, right? This is like my ultimate binding agreement is looking at these things. So in the opposition category, right, I have the opposing virtues, which are criticism, comparison, and judgment. On the other side, I have truth, honesty, and integrity. Those are my green light emotions. Those are the green light experiences that I want. If something went haywire, are you going to be truthful with me? Are you going to tell me the truth? Just straight up, are you going to tell me the truth? The part about honesty has to do with are you being honest about reality? Are you being in the here and now? And lastly, the integrity part, the way I look at that is just, are you doing the right thing when nobody's looking? If someone comes and does their inspection route, are they going to come and see that you've been doing the right thing? If there was a hidden camera in the room and you didn't know it was there, would you do the right thing? Or would you badmouth me or somebody else or go into the criticism, comparison, and judgment? And so I just have chosen to live my life by these virtues. And it took a lot of work to figure these out because it's how my relationships show up everywhere. I use these same virtues with my friends, with my family, with my partners, with my clients, and they've just proven to be the North Star. And so it's incredibly meaningful. And I learned that from a Taoist monk who spent 45 years as a psychologist. And I would say it's a 2-hour conversation that changed my life because he gave me incredible insight into deep personal responsibility, but also how to live an inspired life in spirit. And that's been a really, really powerful revelation for me that I've carried with me since that time.
I love that framework. I love the three things on each side. And it's interesting because, as lawyers, investment bankers, accountants talk about doing due diligence, and obviously you can do legal, financial, and due diligence. There's a lot of talk now even about cultural due diligence. This is another angle on it, right? Like it's really values, right? Diligence, right? Which I think is absolutely the deepest cut, on all of it. And, what came, as I was listening to that, because I haven't, it's the first time I've heard that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, somebody's out there is going to say, well, how do I determine those things? And the first answer that came to me was, well, one of the reasons why a lot of people are thinking, well, how can I possibly determine those things is because they're not thinking about building that 2-year relationship, right?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, if you and I meet and I'm looking to sell you something or do a transaction or convince you to invest in my company, whatever it is, and we just met, it's going to be, you can get maybe a sense, but it's going to be impossible to know whether those values are there or not. So, those things tie together, right?
They do, even when I ran, like one of my companies was a digital marketing agency. And so I had enrollment in my enrollment process. They'd have to fill out an application. And it wasn't just questions around like, how big's your list? What are your products? Tell us more about this. What was your revenue last year? Those things are important. But the things that really actually mattered was for me to understand when I'd ask the question of like, how do you view the world? Because I'm so curious, because to me, those are the things like, again, it's what's the common denominator that we're all reduced by in our humanity, which when, the toothpaste bottle gets squeezed, what comes out? If you're an investor, you're going to want to know. If you're running a business and you got people counting on you, team members, family, investors, partners, you want to know if that thing gets squeezed, what comes out? And so how do you view the world? Is it a place that's scarce and broken, or is it the land of opportunity? And there's so much abundance and that you just want to play your part in helping humanity. It's a very different question than 99.9% of people would answer, but I gave everybody fair warning at the beginning. I don't even see a box, therefore I exist within the ether. So those are the questions that I want the answers to, because I believe that those are the things that are the guiding principles in my life. And by the way, I tell people, if that sounds too woo-woo and too crazy to you, then listen, we're just not going to jam. Like I'd rather know that now than not in the future. And so, but what I'm learning, by the way, is that 99.5% of people really respect and value the idea that depth in relationships still has its holding and still has deep, meaning in the world. And, and those are the types of people that I jam with, and we do really epic things together. I've always said you cannot do epic things with basic people, basic mindsets, basic beliefs, basic stories. No, I want to, go all out. I want to live a life of deep meaning before I come and make my way back to the earth again. So, so that's it, man. That's my heart. And I really want to make a meaningful contribution to the world. I want to help other people who are doing the same.
Yeah. And I love that because, one of the things that I've talked about in various other contexts is like, I talk about this in terms of building a model. Like, for example, when we work with companies that want to do acquisitions, right? They want to go to acquisition. Yeah. We talk about, well, you want to build a model, right? You don't just do a deal here, a deal there with all different,
of course,
right? Before you even get a deal structure, you want to build a model. Like, what is your premise? What is your approach? Who are you trying to target? What do you want? What are you trying to achieve? What's your why, right? Ultimately, and you build a model around that, then you have a deal structure within it. Then you have a value proposition for that model. And the great part about that is not only does it attract the people who that model appeals to and that value prop appeals to, but it also repels the people who, which is at least equally important and maybe even more important because you don't waste time with all the people who are not. And this, you could say the same thing about this at a much deeper level, right? People don't align with those values and you're really vetting for them and out there, then not only are you going to not only attract, but also connect more deeply with the folks that you do, but you're also, especially on a values level, it becomes very uncomfortable for people who can't align with those values to be in space like that. So they tend to opt out.
Very quickly. And what do you know will happen in the opt-out? Comparison, criticism, and judgment.
Yeah.
Literally, the disqualification process itself showcases the lack of alignment. And that's why in a lot of my personal development work that I do with folks and also within companies is focusing on some of these virtues, because then we can lead it back to do you want your team criticizing, comparing, and judging one another? It's like, no, I can teach my kids these principles who are 7, 5, 3, and 1 years old. And in addition, I can talk about them. And I have, guys who have been in the personal development and or organizational development business, and they're in their 80s. And they say, wow, that simplicity is really powerful. And I always say, yes, it's a part of my truth, but I got it from my buddy, David Lee James. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, it could apply to all areas of life, but certainly it is a phenomenal, almost to say it's due diligence or a vetting process is not even close to giving it justice, right? It's a, it's a core filter through which, you can judge who, or not judge probably be a word, who you can determine who are the right partners. And, then of course, those partnerships are going to be much more long lasting and successful and fulfilling and fun, right?
It's so true.
Yeah. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Great stuff. Listen, man, we have so many intersecting and overlapping approaches and beliefs and commitment to, combining the hardcore business with the personal growth, stuff.
Yes,
so we can
sir.
talk forever, but we're coming to the end of our time here. So before I ask you my final question, what's the best place people find out more about all this great stuff you do for people and companies?
Yeah. So anywhere on social media, you can just look up my name, Nick Cavuoto. It's NickCav as in victory, UOTO. And that's also nickcavuoto.com. And yeah, I'm everywhere online. So that shouldn't be an issue. Just don't type in Neil because I have no relation. Although I've come up on his searches and people yell at me on Twitter a lot because of him.
I love it. All right. And so talking about values, of course, I always end the podcast with the same question, which is about my highest value, most important thing for me is freedom. My highest value in life is freedom. And that means for me, everything from freedom from all people around the world from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you and how does it impact your life and business?
Freedom to me is synonymous with redemption. I've noticed I've done a lot of training in content development and story arcs and understanding people's individual stories. The first thing I ever did professionally was I was a filmmaker, right? So I would go back to these things that there's just so many angles. But the concept is like we all experience something normal in our lives where life is just normal, just is the way that it is. And there's some inciting event or like what I like to call an explosion that happens in our lives. And as an example, when I lost $1 million in 2 days from COVID and running some of these newer businesses that were just getting started and having to figure that out, it's like what was normal before that was like life was easy, like with having a couple $100,000 a month in profitability in my companies, and I hadn't to think about anything. And then all of a sudden, a major fracture happened that really made me rethink how I was doing life. Now, most people stop in the chasm between normal and explosion. They stop there. And they're missing the liberation, be it the freedom of what redemption is. Redemption becomes the new normal in someone's story, in their human experience, or even in their business, or their outlook, their perspective, their relationships, their partnerships. What is a redemption? And I think that I'm just feeling led to tell the person who's had a bad partner deal go sour, who's had someone who maybe has gutted their business from the inside out, or some bad thing happened within investing in a partnership or in a relationship. Redemption is on the other side. You cannot have the freedom in your business that you want without the redeeming qualities of saying yes again, of trusting again, of asking for help again when it comes to the angle of partnerships. Because like I've said, in building 4 different companies and investing in other companies and working with some of the most prominent people in business, partnerships is always the first gateway to creating massive success in your business, and it has to be done right. And thank you, Corey, for being the one who's championing this conversation, because so many people's lives are more meaningful and have deeper opportunity and impact because of you. So I want to say thank you, my friend. Big love to you, and certainly appreciate the work that you're doing.
Nick, I appreciate you saying that. And listen, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and I love the work you do and the impact you have. And listen, you and I, you said it, my listeners know that, it's about service and impact. Everything. And the truth is, if you provide value to people and you're really committed to service, you build those relationships, everything else around that, including the financial reward comes. So in any case, I've loved our conversation and I really appreciate you being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you, man. Much love. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.